Have you ever noticed how you can be patient, calm, and regulated with strangers, but then you get home and the smallest thing can set you off? You can answer your emails calmly, you handle stress professionally, but your child spills milk and suddenly you react in a way that doesn't even feel like it's you. What if I told you today that it's not you failing as a parent, but that's your nervous system finally being able to relax and exhale? Today, we're going to break down why you're not your worst at home. You're actually your most unmasked self and what to do with that information. You are not two different people. You are the same person at work or out in public as you are at home. And you're not better in public and then worse at home. That's not what this episode's about. What you're doing is operating under two very different nervous system states. So when we go out in public, there's often a performance component. We have to show up a certain way. We have to project ourselves a certain way. We have to show perception of what we should be in those moments. And there's also more of an awareness of maybe judgment from other people and things like that. So we operate under a certain amount of pressure. But at home, we can decompress and we can expose our true self. Let's put this into context a little bit. I'm going to equate this to our children when they go to school or when they go to daycare or things like that. Parents often ask why, when they get home, do they have tantrums? Do they throw their stuff around? Do they start lashing out or having breakdowns and things like that? But when they're at school, their teachers are saying, oh my gosh, they're the most well behaved child. It's the same situation where their nervous system in those moments of at school are operating under a certain amount of pressure. They also may not feel comfortable releasing their emotions at school, as it is often not accepted by school systems. That's not what this episode is about, but the school system doesn't allow a child to fully feel necessarily their full emotions. They are expected to fall in line and do as the class is doing and things like that. And that puts a lot of pressure on kids. At home, when they get home, they just completely crash, I would say, but they completely decompress because they feel safe in expressing themselves. And their nervous system is allowed to take that huge exhale and just truly be. As much as our children are coming home that way, we are doing the exact same thing. Now, the context may be a little bit different. Like, we as parents may perform out in public, perform, quote unquote, perform, and then come home and just be like, okay, like, I need a huge exhale. Like, I just need to be. Similarly, it's when have you noticed sometimes for myself, I feel more comfortable being my true self at home than out in public. I may be more silly at home. I may be laughing at different things, maybe a little bit more joking and things like that. But that's because my nervous system feels like it's completely safe and completely able to decompress. But this episode is more about how when we come home, that decompression can sometimes make it feel like we are two different people where we can be calm in public and completely lash out at home, but that's not the case. So you don't become someone else at home, you become someone who's less filtered. And I really hope that lands today because honestly, that's what this whole episode's going to be about. To understand this, though, we need to understand and talk about what masking is. Masking in public versus being authentic at home. Masking is basically social regulation. It's emotional suppression of your emotions and behavior control to meet expectations. So preventing of being judged or suppressing any big feelings. So for example, if you're at work, if you work in the workforce, holding your tone. Or if you're at home and you're on the call with the doctor, holding your tone if you're frustrated, right? Or if you're feeling really overwhelmed, a lot of us smile through it. We don't let that overwhelmed feeling settle in. We just mask it. That's not feeling the emotion. It's smiling when you're overwhelmed. Or maybe we'll delay reactions. So you may feel really frustrated, but you won't in that moment express your frustration. And we talk about stacking stress, and this is one of the ways that stress is stacked. When we come home and our nervous system feels completely at ease to finally just be, that's when we can see some of these escalations start to play out. At home, that mask completely drops. There's no mask needed because we're just allowed to be, we're allowed to breathe. But and then that being said, there's less cognitive monitoring. So we're not monitoring consistently what's going on in our brain or how we're feeling or any of those things. Reactions just pop up as they are because we feel safe in those moments. And in those moments, there may be more emotional leakage. So this is where you would lash out, for example, if your child spilled milk, or express your frustration a lot faster. There's no masking anymore, it just comes up as it is. Having masking isn't being fake, what it is being adaptive to a different environment. And like I said, when we're out in public or out in whatever, it could be a birthday party or a social gathering, there's a certain amount of expectation that's put on you as a being, right? There is, as an adult, there's certain expectations on how you show up. There's certain expectations on what you say and how you say it. And that doesn't mean that we're being fake. It just means that we're meeting those expectations in that moment. You're not more real at home because you're being worse. You're more real because you're being less managed, or you're managing your nervous system a lot less. Your nervous system is constantly scanning, like, where am I the safest? Where do I need to perform? Where do I need to let go? These are constantly questions coming up in your nervous system that your nervous system is constantly monitoring. So it's like a little bit of a hierarchy of safety. In public, we have to have the highest control of our emotions. We have to have the highest control of our reactions and things like that. In social relationships, maybe we have a little bit of moderate control. So that might be looking like when you're out with your friends or out with acquaintances and things like that, there's a moderate control. So we don't have to have a super high control, but there's still moderate control of how we're showing up. Maybe we can be a bit more silly. Maybe we can express ourselves a little bit more, but we're still very much, our nervous system is still very much asking, am I safe here? Do I need to perform, or can I let go? When we're at home, we have the lowest amount of control. So this is where we feel the highest amount of safety, but the lowest amount of control of our nervous system. It's a nervous system hierarchy of safety, basically, that our nervous system works through every single time that we are out in public, at home, and it is constantly running. So your system doesn't relax when it's feeling unsafe. So that's when we're out in public, right? Lowest amount of safety, but highest amount of control. It doesn't relax when we feel unsafe. So our nervous system is stuck in this almost increased zone of needing to be perfect in those moments and not feeling safe. So it's stuck on these moments and not feeling safe throughout the day. And then when we get home, it relaxes where it trusts the most. And that's typically at home. And honestly, your home is supposed to be where you feel the safest and your guard can drop and you just are allowing yourself to be. And this goes for us as adults and parents, but also for our children. We want them to be able to come home and express themselves and provide that safe environment for expression. This is the work of generational parenting and changing generational patterns, right? Having that safe home to be able to come home to and truly express themselves. And when we allow our children to express themselves, they are then training their own nervous systems to be able to understand what safety looks like. And that's really important as a conscious parent. Outside of this nervous system hierarchy of safety, like, my goal in life as a mom, as a mother, is to make sure that my children always feel safe in their environment. And when they come to me, they feel safe to have conversation, regardless of what it is. That's my main objective as a mom. I want them to feel like they can be safe, and that their nervous systems can settle when they're around me because it's a safe place. Children can actually trigger deeper than adults, and we're going to slow down a little bit here just because it's a little bit more emotional to speak about. Children activate our attachment system. It's not logical, but what it is, it's biological and emotional memory. They mirror the vulnerability, the dependency, the need that we may have. And this matters because it triggers unresolved experiences in us as parents. So it can activate the younger parts of us as parents. And often this can feel disproportionate because it is disproportionate. So an example of what I just said is, it's not the spilled milk, it's what our system associates with chaos, maybe lack of control, maybe feeling really overwhelmed. Your child isn't triggering your present state, they're touching your past. There's this thing called, we talk about emotional regulation a lot, but there's something called emotional exposure as well. And there's a critical distinction between emotional exposure and emotional regulation. So, exposure is talking about the feelings that come up, okay? And the regulation is how you respond to those emotions, how you respond to those feelings. So, at home, for instance, exposure of emotions increase, right? So the feelings can come up a lot faster and the regulation then decreases. And this happens because there's less prefrontal override and there's less external pressure to hold it all together, right? We're not performing anymore. We don't need to regulate our emotions. We can allow ourselves to expose ourselves emotionally because we're in a safe environment. You're not giving your kids the worst of you. What you're actually doing is giving them the unprocessed parts, the real, authentic, raw parts of you that you finally have a safe space to allow them to surface. And again, our children aren't looking for perfect parents. They're looking for present ones who show up and ones who understand that healing can be done at many different parts. It doesn't have to be perfect all the time. You don't have to have that regulation 100% of the time. There's still a very real, authentic, raw portion of you that your children are witnessing, and they're allowed to witness that in their own safe way. This doesn't justify, like I've said this before, this doesn't justify harmful behavior, but it does explain why it happens. Things like emotional exposure is why it's important to have built-in regulating periods. Using different tools like my 90-second nervous system reset, 90 seconds allows you to regulate yourself so that when the exposure happens, your children can get better parts of you. This episode has been a lot of science behind it, and I'm going to go into a little bit more. But the prefrontal cortex, which is the logic and the control part of your brain, it works harder when you're in public. So it downgrades when you're in safe environments. But when we're in public, the logic and control at its peak, okay? The brain then conserves energy by reducing control when the threat is low. And that's often a home because we feel safe in our own spaces. So the attachment system activates deeper emotional memory and then links present moments to past experiences. Your brain doesn't relax control because it doesn't care. It relaxes control because it trusts the environment that you're in. So when you feel yourself getting more dysregulated, look at your environment. You must feel safe in your environment. And that's important to remember because our environments are so impactful. It allows our nervous systems to pause and reset and to recalibrate. And so that's something to celebrate in those moments. Your environment is feeling safe. Maybe wondering, like, why do my kids often get the worst of me? They're not getting the worst. They're getting actually your real-time nervous system. They're seeing, like I said, the real, authentic, raw part of who you are. That's so important for them to witness because we're not showing up as perfect parents. We're not supposed to show up as perfect parents. We're not supposed to give them a fully regulated parent. Otherwise, they'll never learn what dysregulation looks like in a safe way. And with the awareness, they then have a choice. And with our awareness, we have a choice. So the exposure to dysregulation provides an opportunity for healing, and it will continuously provide an opportunity for healing. The goal isn't to be perfect at home. The goal is never to be perfect. It's to become conscious in the place where you feel the safest. And that's tying this all together. There's no room for guilt here. What we are looking for is to be conscious in the place that we feel the safest. And that's often at home with our children. We're going to just do a quick little micro integration to help through this kind of situation. I want you to notice really this one thing today. Number one is, where do you feel the most controlled? And then where do you feel the most activated? Then I want you to ask yourself, what am I holding in one space and releasing in another? Name it in that moment. Really name it and say, this isn't me failing. This is my system unloading. And you can still take accountability for your actions. Always take accountability for your actions. So if there was a dysregulated moment, the repair is important. But it's not you failing. What it is, your system unloading. And this is to create an awareness about what's going on in our bodies and in our minds, in our nervous systems in those moments. You're not broken for struggling more at home. You're human in the one place that the body believes it can finally let go. Your home isn't where you fall apart. It's where your nervous system asks to be put together differently, in a very different way. If this resonated, I would love for you to download the 90-second nervous system reset. I'll put it in the show notes. It's designed for the moments where you become dysregulated so that in 90 seconds you can regulate yourself. And then you can react in a way that you choose to instead of a way that you don't want to. Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Legacy Shift podcast, and we will see you in next week's episode.